Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast, Derek and Eric. The return of Eric to our podcast. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
It's been a minute, and we're going to throw you right into the harrowing tale of Jeremy Renner's Snowplow accident. We've got all the details now because he spoke with Diane Sawyer about it last night, and tell us what happened.
It's so much more insane than I even thought it was. Because you hear the story like, oh, his snowplow ran over him, ran over his leg. So
Yes.
I thought it had run over his leg and crushed his knee, and which is horrible enough.
Sure, but you thought he went in perpendicular under the tracks because it sounded like, how could anyone survive going underneath
the
entirely?
thing weighs 7 tons. So when you talked to Diane Sawyer, they showed an animation that basically he was trying to jump on the track while it was moving, and it pulled him under and essentially rolled over almost his entire body.
Yeah, he and his nephew were apparently pushing a car out of the snow with the snowplow. So his nephew is between a truck and a snowplow. And Jeremy described it as he was sort of leaning out of the cab of the snowplow while it's moving to see that his nephew was okay and not between the two things. Falls out of the snowplow, and the snowplow is still engaged and moving towards his nephew, going to sort of pancake him between these two vehicles. When he falls out, he jumps, tries to get back in so he can engage the brake, I assume, or stop the snowplow in some way. But the tracks are moving very quickly. And the animation, these are used in trials a lot. This one is horrific to me. It's absolutely horrific because he's face down when he falls
My
off.
stomach knotted up just seeing it. So he described what that experience was like, and this is what he said to Diane Sawyer about it.
This is when the fast-moving tracks hurl him forward in front of the machine as he shouts a vow.
That's what I screamed, by the way, when I went under the thing. Not today. Is what I screamed. Sorry for the language.
Your foot went down in one of these.
I don't know. That I couldn't tell you for sure.
Don't know if your head hit this.
Don't know. It felt like someone took the wind out of you. Too many things are going on in the body to feel pain. It's everything. It's like if your soul could have pain.
He felt it crush his toes, then ankles, then legs, his chest up to his eye that's bulging out.
It was cracked, I believe, and I could see my eye with my other eye.
So at one point during this interview, he describes, because you think about a snowplow as sometimes on snow, which is soft, so there would be some give. He says that's not the case. This had plowed the earth, so he was on asphalt, which is very hard, and ice, and he felt the full brunt of this snowplow on his body. It's not like plunging into soft snow and buffering that in any way.
It was frozen and packed down, and it was asphalt underneath it, as you said.
It's impossible to fathom.
And that he
surviving
was
that.
Clearly conscious for so much of it, to feel just this crushing weight moving up your entire body, and you'd have to assume you're going to die. Like,
you have to assume that.
It's interesting that he yelled out, "Not today."
Do you remember the scene from Roger Rabbit when he is the steamroller goes over him? It's hard to even wrap your head around something that heavy on flesh and bone, and that's he endured that and was conscious throughout it. Said he felt his soul having pain. It's
he saw his eyeball with his other eye. How it is a miracle that he survived that.
It's an absolute miracle.
And you see him in the interview, looks like Jeremy Renner, like you picture him in your head. Looks like no, at least, physical damage externally that's visible.
It did put a lot of perspective in his life because at some point she asks him, she reads down the list of injuries and, they're what you expect when you're crushed by a snowplow, horrific things. And she says, do you think you'll ever do stunts again? Because Jeremy Renner before this was an action hero. I mean, he came out on the scene in Hurt Locker, already an action movie. And then he's Hawkeye and
did his own stunts a lot of the time.
Yeah, he did the sort of like jumping from things and barrel rolling sort of parkour type moves. And she says, are you going to do that again? And he says, I'm in my mid-50s. I think he's 52 now. And he's like, I'm not going to do that. I'll hang out in my trailer and let the stunt guy do it. He has a sense of humor about this.
I like that he goes,
which is hard to imagine.
In that very actory way. He's like, you know what? I have no ego about this now. Like, bring the stunt guy in. I don't need to do this now.
And then there's a moment I wanted to touch upon because I have a daughter, and Diane Sawyer shows him a picture of getting out of the hospital, lying on the couch, and his daughter just sort of cradled in his arms. He still looks mangled at this point, but he's at least home recovering. And she says, what'd she say to you? What did your daughter say to you? And he's like, she doesn't have to say anything. She said she was scared and all this kind of stuff, but that hit me. I'm not really super touchy-feely about these things, but that moment of just holding like your kid who must have been terrified to imagine seeing her father in this sort of situation and processing that. She's a young kid. I don't know exactly how old, but I would say 10 at most.
If that, yeah.
If that.
And you see him kind of choke up a little bit, like genuinely seeing the photo of him with his daughter. And that was the first time she had seen him because he didn't want her to see him when he first went in the hospital.
Yeah.
And like for his nephew to see him in that moment after that, I mean, you would have to assume he was dead, I would think.
That's what I wonder. So his nephew, wow. I mean, just such a difficult thing for the nephew, I'm sure, to process, because his impulse to hang out of the cab was to check on the safety of his nephew. He sees that his nephew's in a precarious situation, falls out in trying to save his nephew, suffers this horrific accident. You know, there's survivor's guilt. There's all those sorts of things that must be going through the nephew's mind. Jeremy, to his credit, I thought he just handled this so maturely. He's like, this was all my fault. You know, I got on the moving tracks. It doesn't sound like he's gearing up for any lawsuit against the plow company.
No.
I mean, this guy jumped on the moving tracks to try to save a relative from peril.
It's heroic. It is genuinely
it's
heroic.
I mean, I'm cynical, but that's
risked his own
heroism.
safety in the moment, and that's the thing. That's why, you know, he put his foot on the moving track, because you're not thinking.
Yes,
and that's not that he's like dumb. It's just
you're also doing whatever you can in that moment, because you see a snowplow careening towards a relative, so he jumped on the tracks to try to get back in the cab. I mean,
you're trying to save someone, and had he, you know, been able to get his footing had been slightly different, maybe he would have been able to get back in the cab without being pulled under. And he says he's not sure exactly, because Diane asked him, "Did your foot get caught in the treads?" He goes, "I don't know."
Right. I don't know.
Because I'm sure
that black out a little bit.
That all happened so very quickly.
Yes.
You don't have time to think. And that is sort of the heroic thing, is that his instinct in that moment, without thinking, was to jump out to try and save someone.
That's right. And he remembers the agonizing pain, because the graphic seems like, she asked, did you hit your head on the plow? Because there's a plow in front, and maybe by the grace of God, you could be knocked out so you don't feel the pain. That's not the case. Jeremy Renner says, I don't know if my head hit that on the way down, but I know I felt every time this tread was crushing my body, from the toes to my lungs collapsing and so forth.
He must
I don't think I've ever heard a story like this by a person who experienced it. I mean,
no.
Remember
you'd be dead.
You would be dead. You remember the documentary? We've talked about this before. There's a famous documentary about people who have jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, because it's a very popular destination for suicide. And there's a man who survived it.
One of like 7 in the world.
One of 7 people. Most of the times, hitting the water from that height, it's like hitting concrete, so you do perish. But this guy had second thoughts while he was jumping, and tells you about what he was feeling about being in the air and knowing that you're going to perish and surviving it. It's similar to me to this. Like, this guy is able to describe something that would have killed most people.
That we don't even want to imagine, because it's so horrific. And then you can't imagine it. And then for someone to describe it, I'm curious, the animation they did, it looks like he's completely in front of the plow. He must have, because it would have crushed his head, and that definitely would have killed him.
That's the only thing I wondered, is how did the tread stop at like crushing his toes and moving up his body?
Maybe he was able to kind of, because I would think your instinct would be to try and claw your way to the side, even as you're being crushed. And maybe that saved him. I don't know.
Your head and brain out, because he did say at some point during the interview, I thought I might just be a spine and a brain. So maybe he had the wherewithal. And because he wasn't knocked unconscious, the wherewithal to move his head at some point. So, you know, a confluence of events that led to this. But it's remarkable. He thinks he's going to walk to movie premieres again. I mean, I don't think he's going to do stunts, as he says, but this is truly remarkable. I'm rarely sort of like on my heels at just how remarkable something is.
Right.
We're a pretty cynical bunch, but this is
that's
pretty
you said the picture with the daughter when he started tearing up. So many times things like that in less dramatic situations. Like, he's an actor. He's a good actor.
Sure.
They can tear up when they need to. No. I have no cynicism about this. Just amazing he's alive. Glad he is.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's move to something odder. So there's all good feelings about Jeremy Renner's recovery. This actually has as happy an ending as you could have. The Kanye West saga has now taken a very strange turn. We now have a lawsuit against Kanye himself and his Donda Academy. And we've always sort of wondered what goes on in the walls of a school that Kanye West designed. He's one of the most, I think even by his own admission, eccentric individuals you could imagine. So how do you combine an educational sort of mission with his brand of eccentricity?
Remember the photos we saw of the students in the academy? There were no chairs. They were all dressed in like dark gray and black head to toe.
Yes.
And like they studied like parkour and things.
Yes.
And like it looked odd even as it was happening.
It looked odd. So now we have a window into what the academy is actually run like. Now, you have to take some of this with a grain of salt, because these are 2 plaintiffs who are disgruntled about being fired. They are 2 teachers. One was a 3rd grade, one was a 5th grade teacher. And they filed this lawsuit, which they put in a lot of detail about what the school is run like, which they didn't really have to. Their grievance is really, it doesn't. It's a host of code violations. Some of our paychecks weren't up to the amount that we should have been paid. And you could have written this lawsuit very simply. We work for the school, and he shorted us money, and he terminated us because of our race. These are two black women who say we were fired from the school. We're the only two black teachers, and we believe it's racial discrimination.
And you
can write that in a simple way.
Again, Kanye hasn't said anything in response to this yet. We're going to get into the details of this, but the things they're saying about it are so specific. It would be an odd thing to make up.
That's right. They're so strange that it's how would you come up with this unless you actually experience it? But anyway, I do want to give some of these details because they're just strange. It reads a little bit, when I was reading this lawsuit, and I read lawsuits all day, it read like a tour rider for Van Halen in the 80s. Because famously Van Halen, they had a tour rider that said, we want a bowl full of M&Ms with all the brown M&Ms removed. And it's become this sort of famous piece of rock folklore about sort of the demands of fussy rock stars. Well, you read this and the school seems like it, because this is the detail that pops out the most is that the kids were only allowed to eat sushi. So Kanye West, and we've known this about him, is famously very into sushi. Apparently,
he always used to go to Nobu with Kim and love sushi.
Well, apparently they say he spends $10,000 a day on sushi. The kids are only allowed to have sushi. No outside lunch is allowed to be brought in. You can only bring in water. And they don't eat it at tables because there's no tables. And Kanye's not into chairs either. So they apparently have to sit on the floor and eat their sushi lunch. They have to wear these uniforms, which we knew something about. And that, I think, is a pot shot. Private schools have uniforms. And they describe them, though, as marching around like you're in an old Apple commercial about communism or something.
But usually when you see a school uniform, it is a uniform of some sort. These were like weird black and gray baggy sweatpants and hoodies. It was an
it feels
odd
like
look
a
for a school
commune or
uniform.
a cult, and that what they're describing is odd. There's no other way to put it. Apparently, the classrooms were all on the first floor and not the second floor because Kanye has a terrifying phobia of stairs.
Doesn't like stairs.
And we know his design aesthetic is what it is. Lots of blank walls. We've seen the inside when Kim and Kanye were together of their homes. It's not splashed with artwork. He also has this weird thing that they point out that he doesn't like crossword puzzles or coloring books. Now, you've got 3rd and 5th grade teacher. There's going to be some coloring. My daughter brings home, artwork of varying quality, I'll say.
But you still put it on the refrigerator.
You put it on the fridge, Kids like to color. It's a very important outlet. It seems aesthetic in this sort of deranged way. I don't know how else to put it. This is not the way a school that teaches K through 12 should be run for the early part of education. It's so outside the norm.
The sushi thing and the stairs, that's all just sort of weird and feeds into Kanye's eccentricities. Some of the other more serious things, in addition to their pay, is that they said there was not really any sort of disciplinary plan in place.
Or even a school nurse.
Right. She said these kids would bully each other, and there was nothing the teachers could do. There was no office to send them to, no reprimanding or anything. It was just chaos, basically. And for the health violations and safety violations, she said the doors were locked from the outside.
Yeah,
and there were no trash cans.
I haven't seen doors locked from the outside since, what was that Morgan Freeman movie back in the day? Lean on Me?
Oh, yeah.
You remember the principal was like, I'm not going to have violence in my schools, and he locked the kids in the school as a measure of safety. Right. That was a triumphant, heroic principle. This is weird, man. This is very, very strange. And you're right. They've nested within all of the sushi details and the eccentric stuff, serious allegations. Right. Now, I don't know if they're true, and Kanye's going to have his sort of response to this. He's going to say a lot of this is overblown, but it'll be difficult for him because they're so strange that seems to be an element of truth. And these women are going to have other disgruntled students, other disgruntled teachers who are going to...
And parents
who may say the same exact thing. And then all of a sudden, Kanye's up against a chorus of people saying one way, and then Kanye West saying something else, and he's not exactly the most credible individual there is.
Because you never, not even that he's lying. You just never know what his perception of it was. And the thing too is, Donda was kindergarten through 12th grade. So if these were like kindergartners, first, second graders, as a testimony to the safety of the school, they're not probably going to understand that. But your 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds will know we were locked in. We had no trash cans. We couldn't bring our own food. We had to eat sushi every single day, which I like sushi, but
Yeah, not every day.
No, and not everybody could
I know
eat
you
it.
don't like mayonnaise on your sushi, though. Eric has a thing about mayonnaise.
Mayonnaise is Satan's favorite condiment.
So look, they're seeking more than $1 million. It's a big ticket item. We'll have to see where this plays out. We have not heard how Kanye is going to respond to this. We do know that when he announced opening the prep school, he called it a world-class education institution with a rigorous core curriculum and emphasis on sustainability, creativity. He's going to say this thing was all by design. Maybe he says, tables aren't really necessary. We need to get back to nature. I don't know. And there are arguments you can make because you can design a private school in a way that doesn't look like a public school. That's the point of it.
And if you send your kids to Donda Academy, you know why you're doing
that's
it
key.
and what. But again,
how many people still ride for this? There's got to be a lot of parents who are now upset to read something like, well, we thought this school was one way, but wow, the way I'm reading this lawsuit, did you really have no trash cans and no school nurse? I'm fine with no tables, but I didn't sign up for this. And I think you're now going to see a lot of people come out of the woodwork. He's under assault from all directions. And, he no longer has his big deals. He has plenty of money, but this could get bad quite quickly for Kanye West.
Right. It could. And remember towards the end of it there, when when Balenciaga and people started dropping him as a client, remember Donda just emailed the parents at late at night. Yes. Oh, we're not having class tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, now we are. Oh, no, now we're not.
And this is a school. I mean,
this isn't like a tour schedule where, he canceled last minute.
Correct.
That's inconvenient for concert goers. This is parents trying to take children to school. And when they're just randomly we're not going to have school. Maybe we are.
Right. The key thing for teaching children, if you learn one thing, is consistency. And the thought of sending your child to a school run by Kanye West, who is the standard bearer of inconsistency, I find a little bit irresponsible by parents to sort of make that decision, but I'll reserve judgment. He has some good qualities, I suppose, and artistic qualities.
Well, I could see thinking when he started this, Kanye is this free thinker who felt like he was probably constrained a bit by his own school experience because he's a genius in his way. So you think, my kid has all this potential.
Right.
Maybe Kanye's somebody who understands that.
Well, here we are. So we'll have to see where this lawsuit goes because it's certainly a rocky start with this filing of the complaint. We'll see you guys next time.